Welcome to the podcast. My name is Father Bill W., and I am an Episcopal priest. I live here in beautiful Austin, Texas, and have had the gift of recovery since December the 27th of 1972. Very grateful for that and for all the people who helped me all along the way. The purpose of the podcast is to go deeper into the history, the psychology, the spirituality of the 12-step program. Also, it's to introduce people to two-way prayer. That's the thing that really gets me going, and encourage you, if you have not done so already, please go to our website. It's titled Two-Way Prayer, and we'll teach you about the form of prayer and meditation that they did in the very early days of AA and coming out of the Oxford group. So I think you'll find it fascinating, and I have found it personally life-changing. We're getting about 1,000 visitors a day going to that website. So
that's beautiful.
It seems to be really meeting a need out there in the 12-step community. So I'm real happy about that. We are into a new series, and it's centered on the work of Viktor Frankl. And Frankl, he was a psychiatrist and the founder of a very unique approach to psychiatry known as logotherapy. And here to help us understand Frankl's work is an old friend of mine, Tom Lavin, who comes to us from Reno, Nevada. And Tom is a psychotherapist, a marriage and family therapist, as well as a licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor. He served for many years as adjunct faculty at the University of Nevada School of Medicine, Psychiatry, and Behavioral Sciences. And Tom and I go way back in time. And for much of that time, he has been out there helping folks find greater meaning and purpose in their lives by applying the principles that Viktor Frankl pioneered and developed in his work with patients. So Tom's got a website. It's really helpful and sends out regular newsletters. And I would encourage you to go there, sign up for the newsletter, and I have put that link into the show notes. So Tom, welcome back to the podcast. I hope you had a great vacation and are ready to go back to work.
Yeah. Hey, Bill. Yeah, we had a great vacation, and I'm fired up. I can't wait to talk with you today.
You're out to the California coast?
Yeah, in the Central Coast in Carmel and Point Lobos in that area. Big Sur.
I haven't been there in many years. It's really beautiful.
Oh, isn't it? Yeah.
Really lovely.
Yeah.
Okay, Tom, in the last episode, we tried really hard. Well, not very. We tried to get through the introduction to Frankl's book, The Doctor and the Soul. Also put a link to that in the show notes. Hey, but we didn't get to finish it. So I wanted to pick up there, and perhaps we could begin with a quote from the introduction that sets logotherapy apart from other forms of therapy. And Frankl writes this: "I believe there is no such thing as psychotherapy unconcerned with values, only one that is blind to values. A psychotherapy which not only recognizes man's spirit, but actually starts from it, may be termed logotherapy. In this connection, logos is intended to signify the spiritual, and beyond that, the meaning." So, Tom, what is Frankl's approach in a nutshell all about? And how can it be helpful, do you think, for people who are in 12-step recovery?
Yeah, great, Bill. Looking forward to sharing that. Might be 2 or 3 nutshells. Okay, cut me off if you need to.
Go for it. Go for it. I'm a food addict, so more is always better.
I want to start off. There's a meme that I've become aware of in the last couple of months. I've seen it a few times popping up, but it says there are 2 important moments in our life. I think you and Viktor Frankl would appreciate this. 2 important moments in our life. The first moment is when we're born, and the second moment is when we find out why.
I like it.
Yeah, it's kind of like what we're talking about. Like, why am I here? I mean, Frankl posits, as we talked about last time, Bill, that compared to other psychiatrists or psychotherapies that might just take a look at the biology of a person or the genetics or the sociology or the family life, the biopsychosocial person, Frankl said, let's take a holistic view, and that needs to include the spiritual / existential experience of the human being. We We cannot exclude that. As we talked about last time, he wrote a book for therapists called The Unheard Cry for Meaning, saying, hey, you guys, your patients are crying to be heard about the yearning that they have for meaning, but you're not hearing it because you're so much into the bio or biopsychosocial model. So he asked people in healthcare to become more aware, as well as all of us individual people, to become more aware of that spiritual dimension and that yearning that we all have. And so logotherapy starts from there, Bill, that Frankl, in his own personal experience and as a psychiatrist and psychotherapist, he also had a doctorate in philosophy, so he was a philosopher as well, posited that our deepest yearning as human beings is to have a sense of meaning. So what does he mean by that? And what does that look like in logotherapy? I want to suggest that when we experience meaning, we're talking about connection. Who and what are we connected to? Doug Hammarskjöld said, do you create or do you destroy? So we might have a meaningful connection with destructive values. We might find some superficial, unfulfilling, but supposedly meaningful connection with money, power, and sex, with things that actually sabotage our life, things that hurt us and hurt other people. We could say that for many of us, maybe there was a time in our life that's what meaning consisted of for us. And we hit a bottom with that then, just like you described last week, Bill.
Yeah.
Life collapses where that paradigm doesn't work. But we can say that's the meaning of my life. I am pursuing that. I'm oriented toward more money, more power, more sex, more status, more
Alcohol.
recognition. Yeah, like we both remember Jung saying, spiritus contra spiritum, that alcohol, the spirits, is a poor substitute for the spirit, but
Right.
that we looked for our spirituality in that. Yes. And again, so there's the alcohol, and then there's the meaningless / meaningful paradigm that is basically useless, Bill. That's where I think Bill Wilson said alcohol was but a symptom of our problem. Let's get down to causes and conditions. And some of those causes and conditions, some of it was biological. Another part of it was we were pursuing a meaningless paradigm of what we thought was truly valuable. So meaning has to do with what we consider to be valuable. What are my values in life? We had values that were 180 degrees off. As Frankl would say, we had an awakening. And of course, in recovery, we talk about that. We have to be oriented toward values that are truly fulfilling, that fulfill our sense of purpose. And so we have connections that are in fact life-giving and productive and creative. And so in order to live then this meaningful life, Frankl said we need to be conscious and responsible. We cannot live a meaningful life if we're not conscious and responsible. And of course, we hear some echoes of the 12 steps with being conscious and responsible, don't we? So conscious means to be aware, and responsible means to do the next right thing. So Frankl said, to lead a meaningful life, we have to be aware of what's going on in our world, what's going on inside of ourselves, physiologically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, what's going on in our relationships. And from this awareness, then, respond as a responsible person. And by that, he meant to make ethical, life-giving choices. Ethics means to do the right thing. Like in recovery, people often talk about do the next right thing. So he would agree with Socrates that the unexamined life is not worth living. We need to be able to examine our life like knock, knock, who am I? What's going on in my life? And then to take action on what we're aware of that will create positive connections in our life.
So the who am I and what am I here for question, sometimes that feels like I'm neurotic and I shouldn't even be asking this question.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if the person I'm trying to deal with isn't responsive to my asking it, then it just goes underground. He says in the introduction, what is it? 20% of the population are dealing with a new form of neurosis.
Yeah.
Where the decline of traditional religious values and societal values, and God, they're in flux right now, huh?
Yeah.
But they've been lost. And so we are lost. We're back to what you said, disconnected.
Yeah. In terms of spirituality, Bill, when you're asking that question, I'm remembering that little saying about, I looked for God, my God eluded me. I sought my soul I could not see. I sought my brother and found all three. And so that finding that fellowship, and also on this horizontal level, that's frequently an introduction to our connection with a power greater than ourselves, and a deeper
Mhm.
meaning in life is the love and connection we experience in the fellowship. If I could go back a little bit, Bill.
Sure.
So I mentioned Socrates, the unexamined life is not worth living. So in fact, Frankl and Socrates and Aristotle and Nietzsche and Carl Jung would not say we're neurotic to be asking ourselves these questions.
Mhm.
These questions have to be asked if we're going to live a fulfilling life. That's why he calls it man's search for meaning. In the 11 steps sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact, we are searching, we're looking for a deeper, ongoing sense of meaning in our life. So, in terms of then being responsible, which is about living a virtuous life, what values are important to me? So Frankl, again, with his PhD in philosophy, was referring to Socrates, but also to Aristotle, who said that to be happy in life, we need to have a good character. And what does Bill talk about so much in the 12 and 12 about character building in the 6th and 7th and other steps? Choosing character over comfort, choosing character over immediate gratification. So Aristotle then said to live a happy life and a meaningful life, we need to choose value-based character traits like honesty, tolerance, love, kindness, courage. And when we live and we truly manifest these virtues in our life, we experience happiness and serenity.
Those are the positive spiritual emotions. Just finished a series covering those.
Oh, that was a wonderful series, Bill. I really enjoyed that. That was really well done.
Yeah, it was good stuff because it
Yeah,
puts some meat on the bones
yeah,
of what's this spirituality thing. It's not
yeah,
this, just feel good stuff. It's
yeah.
pretty concrete.
Yeah, well, yes, to be real, it needs to be concrete. It has to be,
Yeah.
gut level spirituality for all of us, really. And again, that's where Frankl would say reflection is important, but Frankl and Irvin Yalom and other existential psychotherapists would say, along with reflection, we need to have engagement. That's why, like in the 11th step, searching for knowledge of God's will and the power to carry it out. So reflecting and being in touch and aware is important. The next step is engagement with life. That meaning is engagement with my life today and what that's all about today.
Back to your connection word.
Yes, what are my connections today?
Mm-hmm.
And the consciousness part, Bill, when we are being conscious and we're being aware, it's really like the 10th and 11th and 12th step.
Mm-hmm.
To take an inventory, like what's going on with me today, to be conscious is what Frankl would talk about. What are my thoughts? What are my feelings? What are my relationships like? What are my values? Am I being true to myself? Am I hurting other people? Am I sabotaging myself? Am I contributing to life and making life better for other people? So yeah, being conscious is being aware, as opposed to like T.S. Eliot, who said, I had the experience but missed the meaning. Living that unexamined life that's not worth living, as Thoreau said. To be conscious is to be awake and to really be in touch.
Problem is, most of us are asleep, huh?
Well, yes, we are asleep because, the Buddhists talk about Maya, living in a dreamlike state, not really being aware, really living. And Bill talks about this in the 12 and 12, where he talks about where we've lived a life based on instincts rather than character building. We can talk about this more later, Bill, if you want, but living a life that's based on instincts or what society expects of us or what our parents, or even to go further, maybe we can talk about this more, even what the church or religion might expect from us. Nietzsche talked about being true to yourself which means casting aside, listening to all these other paradigms, like take what you need and leave the rest, right? Listening to all these other paradigms, but then deciding what's true for you, what resonates with us deep in our spirit. That's truly living. And we'll be talking about this more with fanaticism and being part of the collective, etc., rather than living a true, authentic life. We talked last week about Frankl saying meaning is the foundation of therapy. It's the foundation of life worth living. So one of the things that I will ask my patients relatively soon in our psychotherapy, when the time is appropriate, I will ask them, what type of person do you truly aspire to be? And what type of life do you aspire to live? Who would you really like to be? And what can we do then in therapy to facilitate that happening, that you become this person you aspire to be? And then what type of life do you aspire to live? I mean, there's a deep sense of, we're talking about fulfillment there.
Right.
Be truly alive and fulfilled.
Which is talking about something different than your symptoms.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Hugely different.
Oh, yes. And again, you know, Bill, and this is where Frankl was a pioneer in many ways to 21st century cognitive behavior therapy. So if we take a look at acceptance and commitment therapy as an example, which is another type of therapy I practice, they go together like this, is very much based on to identify symptoms and diagnose and make the symptoms go away. As Frankl pointed out, and now acceptance and commitment therapy and so many other therapies recognize we don't want to even focus on the symptoms going away. When we focus on, as Frankl said, say yes to life in spite of everything, symptoms go in the background as we are focused on this vision of living our life and being connected with something greater than ourselves through self-transcendence. The symptoms by themselves fade to the background then.
Yeah. One of the best sessions I ever had was with a group of young guys. And the question I posed to them was, let's get real honest. You know, what was it that alcohol and drugs did for you? You know, that was so positive, and they just came alive because it was like everybody wanted to talk about the negative. You know, did this bad, that bad, but what did it do for you that was good, that you were really looking for inside? You know?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh
it
yeah.
gave them the freedom to access what you're talking about, Tom.
Yeah, yeah. Like there's that phrase in the 12 step of the 12 and 12, I believe, where it says alcohol. We found that alcohol could not do for us what we could not do for ourselves. So what were we looking for in alcohol in terms of relieving our anxiety, our depression, to be more social, to have more fun, to be in touch with our body and our emotions, to be feel alive,
to fit
feel
in,
alive.
to be connected, to feel connected.
Yeah, to feel connected. Now, of course, it was a false medium of connection.
Oh,
but
I'm so
I'll tell you
sorry
what,
to
when
hear
you're 14
that.
or 15 years old and you haven't felt connection with anybody or anything, and you've only felt alienated and isolated,
Right.
and you're getting drunk or loaded and you feel connected to life, and you go, my gosh, I've never felt this good my whole life.
Right.
And then we pursue that to the gates of hell.
And then when we give up the drugs, all those people go away anyway.
Yes.
Because it was not real.
It begins to make it clear this isn't real. And then we say, well, what is there?
Right.
And that's where that hitting bottom, that time of demoralization is like, well, what is there then? And that's where, when we do hit bottom and we reach out in one way or another and ask for help. Bill Wilson said this in the big book. There are many different ways that people find recovery. And we just want people to find recovery in any avenue that they can.
Right.
Like St. Teresa said, in my father's house, in my father's mansion, there are many rooms. There are many ways to find recovery. For many people, it is reaching out to the fellowship and the 12 steps. Other people find it different ways. A basic phenomenon is hitting bottom. Where do I turn now? And in that moment,
right,
like in the 10th step of the 12 and 12, where it says pain is the touchstone of growth, in that moment, a whole new world can open up to us. That there is a different way. And it's not the way that I've been looking for love in all the wrong places.
That's right. And that spirals, Tom. That's been my experience.
Mm.
You have the big bottom, I guess, which starts off the journey. I get very disappointed when I'm in a 12-step meeting and people invariably go back to their first experience of bottom, you
Yeah.
know? And I think that's important and
Uh-huh.
helpful, but give me the other bottoms. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
I've had 10,000 bottoms in my
Yeah.
recovery,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they're important to me along the way.
Because, well, if we're growing in the program, we're going to have those.
That's right.
And
That's
that's where
exactly right.
sometimes people, we have these bottoms in recovery. And if we don't continue to reach out for help or use the 12 steps, then people go out and relapse because they figure this isn't working for me. And the only way I know how to feel good, I have this I have this euphoric memory. And
Right.
so I'm going to go out and get loaded because the program's not working for me. When in fact, that spiraling thing you talk about, Bill, it does work at higher and deeper levels for us. Bill Wilson's Grapevine article, where he talks about love and emotional sobriety and recovery, he talks about the psychological research about alcoholics, and it showed we're emotionally immature and grandiose. And he said how we hated that verdict. But then he says, we have to keep growing in recovery.
Right.
And so this is where we keep cycling through the 12 steps and the fellowship at a deeper level. And like you were saying last time, we also begin to do other research into Viktor Frankl and Carl Jung and Ernie Kurtz with the spirituality of imperfection. We learn about the history of AA, those kinds of things. As Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob both did, we begin through the Oxford group. We experience this at a deeper and higher level.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Let's dive into the values thing, Tom. Help
All
me
right.
understand this. So
Yeah.
Frankl distinguishes three different sets of values:
Yeah.
creative, experiential, and attitudinal.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wonder if you could lead us through those three.
Yeah, and Bill, this is a wonderful roadmap. It's simple, but it's really profound. Again, like in psychotherapy with me, and they're wondering, like, well, who am I now at this time of my life after I'm now getting into recovery? Or I've just had a divorce, or my kids have left and all of them have gone away to college, or my spouse died, or my child died. These things that happen in our lives, and it's upside down. And I wonder what's the meaning of my life now. And Viktor Frankl made this really simple but profound roadmap. Like you said, creative values, experiential values, attitudinal values. So he said, the first way we find meaning is through creative values. Again, connection, right? So creative values are, what am I doing? How am I using my talents and my gifts to make my life and the lives of other people better? I'm not just using my talents and my gifts to find out what can I get for me, me, me. Again, like Frankl said, don't ask what you can expect from life, ask what life expects from you. Why am I here? What talents and gifts do I have? And how can I use that, like through my vocation, through my work, through my career, through volunteer work, by being a husband, being a father, being a grandfather, being a grandmother, being a wife, these very concrete dimensions of living. Am I looking at what I can do to contribute to life and being procreative in that way? So creative values is the first one that he mentioned, Bill.
I don't think he mentioned this in this section of the book,
Uh-huh.
but I associated with Frankl that he talked about a garbage man in Berlin, I think it was,
Hmm.
whose job doesn't look like it's much, but he would collect dolls and children's toys that were tossed away as he went his rounds, clean them up
Yeah,
and give them to poor
yeah,
kids who had nothing. He created meaning.
yeah. And another story that Frankl tells, and this is so important, Bill, because sometimes when we think about what am I giving to the world, and sometimes my patients will have like, what am I, I'm not Viktor Frankl, I'm not Gandhi, I'm not Martin Luther King. So again, Frankl talked about how In the radius of our life, that's all I'm responsible for. In the radius of my life, look around, again, like being aware, being conscious. Where can I give? Where can I help? And like you were saying, Bill, he gave a beautiful example of hospital, because of course he spent most of his life in hospitals helping people. He said, which person is really living creative values and is the real helpful healing person here? The patient is in bed, the doctor comes in, he picks up the chart, he doesn't make eye contact, he looks at the chart, he says, I'm going to send in a physical therapist, I'll be back tomorrow, doesn't make eye contact and leaves. Then next, the housekeeper comes in and is cleaning the room. Well, how are you today, Mr. Wigmore? How are you doing today? You're looking much better. I saw your family was here yesterday. Oh my gosh, what a beautiful wife and children and grandchildren. You must be really proud of them. How is your recovery looking? When are you supposed to be discharged? Is it hard for you to be away from work? And asking the patient these questions, right? And then in leaving says, it's really good to see how well you're looking. I hope you have a good day. So Frankl said, who is the true healer here? The housekeeper that was cleaning the room or the doctor? And it's obvious it was the housekeeper, huh?
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
of how they showed up in the world.
And so that's and that's an example of connection, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So again, how are we showing up in the world? What values are we manifesting in terms of courage and kindness and tolerance and compassion and empathy, these kinds of things. Now, also, Bill, I want to step back for a minute. So creative values is about what I can give to the world, but stepping back even more deeply, creative values being living a life of self-transcendence, that my life is not about me. Having that awakening that my life is not about me. I am here to serve. I am here to make a difference in the world, in my own little circle of the world. And again, we see this in the 3rd and 7th step prayers in the big book. Bill references in the 11th step the prayer of St. Francis, which is all about letting my ego go and letting go of me, and make me an instrument of your peace. Where there's hatred, let me sow love. Where there's forgiveness, pardon, all that. Frankl too, just like the 12 steps refer to this idea that we come to realize through the 12 steps or any other type of spiritual awakening we have via logotherapy or ACT or through our religious practices or going on a pilgrimage or whatever, that my life is not about me. And what an awakening that is. We are no longer grasping. We're no longer, and again, like in the big book where it says we're like the stage director, we're trying to run the whole world. It's like, I'm not trying to run the whole world anymore. I'm trying to be a part of it. Again, going back to connection. I want to be a part of the world. I don't want to run the world anymore.
And my world is in front of me.
Yes.
It's what's present.
Being present to that world. And then responsible also means being able to respond. What are the needs of my wife and children and my colleagues and my neighbors, my community, and responding to that and showing up, like you were talking earlier, Bill, about being present in this moment and responding to that. So, Bill, unless you had any other questions about creative values, that's kind of an overview, okay?
That's good. Experiential.
Okay. Yeah, so creative values is, what am I giving to the world? Experiential values, and this is a really important insight that Frankl had. Experiential values, we experience meaning by what is the world giving to me? What does the world give to me? He realizes when we're fully human and fully alive and we're awake, life is giving to us and we feel a sense of connection and joy about, my God, it's so good to be alive. Because so often we tend to think people when they think about meaning, they automatically go to creative values and they think that's all there is, but there's 2 more. So experiential values. What is life giving to me? I like to say this is kind of like when you're at the drawing for a raffle and they say you must be present to win. It's the same thing with experiential values. We must be present to win. Am I being present in my life as I wake up in the morning and I feel alive? And it's good to be alive. Then have that first cup of coffee and open up the drapes and see the sunrise or the clouds or the plants that are blooming right now in the springtime. And maybe we have a time of meditation or two-way prayer. And then we greet our family members in the morning with hugs and kisses, hopefully. And it's good to see you and I love you. But then other things in our life, how does life speak to us? Is it through nature and going for a hike? Is it through music? Is it through art? All these different activities in life. And we're all unique, going back to our conversation last week about being part of the family of man. So we're not unique, but we're also like a snowflake in that we are unique. How does life give to us? And then do we allow ourselves to participate in that? Like a patient a few years ago, Bill, that I was working with who was really depressed, and we were helping her hopefully experience more aliveness and get out of her depression. And I talked about experiential values and like, where do you experience really being alive and connected? And she would say, of course, we live in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains. And she said, well, I love to go for a hike. I love to walk through the trails and see the sun coming through the pine trees and hear the streams running downhill and feel the dirt in my feet and kick up some dust and hear the birds singing. She said, I just love that. And I said, when's the last time you did that? She said, 2 years ago. I said, no wonder you're depressed. So that became a part of our treatment plan. We both benefited in various different ways through treatment or working at Sacred Heart Center. Vaughn Quinn would talk about that. He'd get a bunch of people out in fire engines and drive around Detroit in fire engines because that's what he loved to do. So he was teaching us there about do what you love to do. What nurtures your spirit is what I like to say. And so again, this woman, as part of her recovery, about going to meetings and working the steps and having a sponsor, and began several times a week to go out in nature and walk the trails and just be in nature. And, depression, Bill, is very much about negative, pessimistic, ruminating thoughts. Negative, pessimistic, ruminating thoughts. So I would encourage her, be aware in the moment when you're out on the trail that that's coming up, be mindful and say, stop. Let me let go of that. Let me be present right now with the sunshine coming through the trees and Thomas Creek running through the hills. Let's be present to that. And so she began to heal. Her depression began to heal. Also, it began to fade in the background like we were talking about. And she just became more engaged in life because those 2 or 3 hikes every week, as it nurtured her spirit, she brought that back into the rest of her life when she got off the trail. So I encourage my patients, as Frankl did, what nurtures your life? What nurtures your spirit? And then build that time into your day or into your week where you are being, like in the raffle, you must be present to win. Set aside some time to avail yourself of that experience so that life speaks to you. It nurtures your spirit. Can I say one more thing, Bill?
Please.
So again, in terms of experiential values, how life gives to us and being present. When Frankl was in Auschwitz, he woke up in the morning, and of course, it's like 2 degrees. They wake up, all they had was basically water with a carrot in it, and they called it soup the day before. He's looking at a 12 or 14-hour day of building trail through the snow, through trail and tracks through the snow, he and his colleagues. He's got threadbare clothing. He's got holes in his shoes. He wakes up, he walks out to the fence, and we talked the other day about guys that were suicidal would run into the wire and kill themselves. He walked up to the wire and he looked out and he saw the sun coming up. And he experienced in that moment the horizon and the sun coming up. And he said, my God, what a beautiful sunrise. So in that moment, he experienced experiential value, life nurturing his spirit to make it through that day.
Those moments are a heck of a lot more frequent if we can become more aware of them.
Exactly. Yes, Bill.
And focus on them and enter into them as fully as we possibly can.
2 things about that then, Bill. This is also what Father Ed Dowling said to Bill Wilson when Bill Wilson was sober 5 years and was really depressed. And Ed Dowling showed up from St. Louis, Jesuit priest, because he wanted to find out more about the 12 steps. Bill started sharing with him, he's sober 5 years. He's the founder of AA, but I'm really depressed. And Father Dowling said, Bill, God gives us moments, and for these moments, we live our lives. So he was saying, Bill, let go of your expectations about what life is supposed to be and just be present to what it is and be open and available when these moments break through into your consciousness and you feel, from Dowling and Bill Wilson's, God's grace in your life. Experiential values is part of that.
When a negative or ruminative thought comes into my mind, though,
Yeah.
at some level, I choose to entertain it. I choose to stay with it.
Yes.
Go with it. Let it take me.
Yes.
Rather than focus on what's in front of me.
Yes.
Which isn't all that bad.
And we call that getting hooked, right?
Yeah.
A negative, pessimistic, ruminating thought or resentment will come up, and we start to stew in it.
Oh yeah.
And
I'm really good at it, Tom. I have a gift for it.
Yeah, well, most of us had our PhDs in that. So when we're mindful in that moment, though, again, being conscious and responsible, it's like, wait a minute, here I go again.
Yeah.
Here I go again. This negative, pessimistic, ruminating thought, this resentment. Let me catch that, and let me say, I'm not going to give that any time or energy. Let me pivot from here. What can I do to be in this moment? And maybe quickly check in with a quick gratitude list. 3 or 4 things that I know I have to be grateful for in my life today. Now, 2 things about that. Sometimes, Bill, as you know, when we feel gratitude, I mean, life is like zippity doo dah. Life is great. It's so good to be alive, be sober. I feel this deep connection. Other times, maybe we're struggling. We're going through a hard time. We're going through a growth spurt in our life. We're going through a hard time, like a transition or a death of someone we love. And so this is where, when we do that quick gratitude inventory, we may not be overtaken with feelings of gratitude. That's when we want to remember that gratitude is an attitude. And so, although I may not feel like it, I can adopt an attitude of gratitude. And Bill, this kind of, when you're ready, this takes us into Frankl's 3rd way of finding meaning in life. Shall we go there?
Yeah. So these are the attitudinal values you're getting into. Let me read the quote. But even a man who finds himself in the greatest distress, in which neither activity nor creativity can bring values to life, nor experience give meaning to it, even such a man can still give his life a meaning by the way he faces his fate, his distress, by taking his unavoidable suffering upon himself. He may yet realize values. Thus, life has meaning to the last breath. The right kind of suffering, facing your fate without flinching, is the highest achievement that has been granted to man.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
That is just beautiful. And I will say, of course, creative values is a wonderful avenue to meaning. Experiential values is also a wonderful venue into meaning. This is so important, though, and is so often overlooked. Again, this idea was addressed in Rabbi Kushner's book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People. And Frankl refers then to attitudinal values. And, many people call me for therapy, Bill, and I know you've experienced this in your time as a counselor and spiritual director, that people reach out to us in their moment of suffering, and they want to talk about it. And we wonder, well, what kind of consolation can I share with them or bring them? And one of the things that I will share with them is this attitudinal values that Frankl talked about, that in your suffering, with your child dying, or your child being laughed at and bullied and beat up and beginning to drink and use drugs, and you're just so at a loss, or there's been an affair and you feel devastated, all these different things that happen to us in life, Frankl will talk about, we can take an attitude toward them. A couple of things about, well, what does he mean by what kind of attitude do we take? The first thing is radical acceptance of what is. In other words, I'm no longer defiant toward it. Like, I don't want this to happen. I refuse to accept it. I won't believe in it. I'm going to rebel against this. Instead, we surrender to it and we accept, yes, this is what is. Again, I'm thinking right now, sometimes I'll work with patients that have chronic illness like Parkinson's or MS. So accepting what is as it is, surrendering to that is part of attitudinal values.
The healing has already started with that. Just
With
getting,
acceptance, yeah.
yes, just getting to that point.
Yes, Bill. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the healing starts. And another thing that we want to then ask them, as I do, what are a couple things you're grateful for? Now, again, we want to do two things. If we ask that question, what are you grateful for? But we don't acknowledge and validate their suffering.
Then it
It's
becomes
like, hey, let's do a quick
Pollyanna-ish.
switch here. Like, put on your big boy pants and let's get grateful right away, right?
Let's
No.
sing. Let's sing. Yes, Jesus loves you.
Yeah. So it's important we acknowledge, yes, you are suffering, you're in pain, but this is where Viktor Frankl said, say yes to life in spite of everything. He didn't say put on rose-colored glasses and pretend like this isn't happened. It's like, no, this hurts, this sucks, this is painful, and let's accept it as it is. Then the next thing is, let's see, what do I have to be grateful for? 3 things that I have to be grateful for in my life today. And the next is, how can I pay it forward? How can I use this suffering and the lessons I'm learning about life? How can I pass it on? How can I pay it forward to help other people from my own growth in wisdom and compassion, which is something that when we encounter suffering in a meaningful way, in a character-driven way that Bill Wilson talks about in the 12th step of the 12 and 12, when we deal with suffering in that regard, suffering then becomes life-giving. We pay it forward. So we begin to share through our own compassion and wisdom with other people. Again, we see so many examples of this in 12-step groups. I will say, I ask people to read some of the autobiographies of Michael J. Fox, who's also in recovery. And again, he is 30 years old. He was at the top of the world, making millions of dollars, beautiful wife, healthy kids, one movie and television show after another. He notices a little tremor here. Oh my gosh, what's this? He finds out he has Parkinson's. He goes out and drinks his brains out for a couple of years, hits bottom, gets into recovery, and his life has been about living these attitudinal values. I mean, what a beautiful story he tells. I think he's written 3 or 4 different biographies now of his journey of dealing with Parkinson's. And a big part of that is his recovery from his alcohol abuse or his alcoholism. But it's a good example of attitudinal values. He started drinking his brains out, hit bottom. He said, you know what? My life has to be more than this. I need to learn lessons that life has for me through this challenge. Again, like Rabbi Kushner, when bad things happen to good people, what lessons can I learn and grow in, and how can I pay it forward and pass it on, which of course is what the 12 steps all about too. If I could say one more thing, Bill talks about this in the middle of the 12th step of the 12 and 12 when he talks about practicing these principles. And he talks about, what about us in recovery when we are disappointed? We have, I forget exactly the examples he gave, but like when a son dies.
We pray for children and we don't get them.
Yes. That piece right there, Bill. That we get sober, but life isn't just a bed of roses. I mean, there are some thorns there too, along with the beauty. So, and there are lessons to be learned there and passed on too, not just how to stay sober, but some of the more, I would say, more sophisticated, grounded, viable sponsors in recovery as they continue to help people into their 5th and 10th and 15th year, and they encounter these things in sobriety. These wise sponsors can share these lessons that, again, Frankl would talked about: accept what is, do our best to be grateful in the moment, and pay it forward. By doing that, our life is meaningful. So those are the three ways globally, Bill, in three nutshells that I just shared with you, okay?
Well, you were right. The nutshells became bountiful there. So once again, Tom, we did not get as far as we had planned to get. We may never get out of this introduction.
Yeah.
The next section is on anxiety, and I really want to give it the time it deserves. So I think we're going to put a wrap on this one.
Yeah.
And
one more thing real quick, Bill.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And I would like to say the whole idea of being conscious and responsible, in my awareness and experience of two-way prayer, that's very much what that perspective is of two-way prayers: to be conscious and responsible, knowledge of God's will and the power to carry it out. And I just wanted to end up with that.
That's right. And it starts, two-way prayer has to start with the 10th step. You have to get a feel for where you are.
Yeah.
In order to know what your prayer should be.
Yes.
You know, I try to do a feeling inventory at that moment. And to go back to where you started, Tom, am I connected or am I disconnected at this moment?
Yes.
That's really my question.
Yeah. Good.
And more times than not, I'm disconnected, you know, and that then becomes the subject of my prayer.
Yes.
You know, it can be big time disconnect or small time disconnect. It's that constant spiral.
That draws us then into it being in touch with that yearning that, oh, I'm disconnected. How do I move toward a more meaningful life and more positive connections, aware of how my shortcomings and character defects are keeping me disconnected? How can I be willing, and am I willing to let go of those? And what will move me forward into a deeper connection with my true self, others, and life in general, which leads to meaning. And as Aristotle said, happiness as well.
I'm very happy that we spent some time on this, because I think you're right. It is really important. It's foundational to moving ahead with Frankl, that we see where we are.
Okay.
And if we're somewhere other than where we are, where we should be, all of that nonsense, it ain't going to go anywhere.
Yes.
You know, I am where I am, but I'm not alone in that. That's why one of the things I love about the big book, you know, the great reality is within. It's not out there somewhere.
Yeah.
It's suffering along with me.
Yes.
It's
well
with
put,
me.
Bill. Yeah.
Okay. Listen, let's leave it there for now. Tom, thank you once again for going through this with us. I would invite you guys to come back next time. I promise you, we will eventually get through this introduction. If not, we're going to cover a hell of a lot in the introduction. So we'll wrap the whole book into it, and I think you're going to benefit significantly from Frankl. Like I said, in the first episode, he kept me going. Sometimes you see someone who's suffering so much more than you are. It puts it into perspective. If this guy can do it, I can do it too. So thank you, Tom.
Well, good to spend time with you.
You too as well. So I invite you guys, if this was helpful, pass it on to somebody else. Come on back next time, and do keep coming back. God bless.